Welcome to Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. I'm Rob Wilson.
I'm Tony the Quano.
Today we are going to be talking about The Empire Strikes Back. Last time we talked about A New Hope.
Sequel.
Now we are talking about one of the greatest sequels of all time, The Empire Strikes Back. Star Wars Episode 5.
I love this movie, dude.
So do I.
It's maybe technically better.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's one of those movies.
It's hard to pick.
A lot of people pick Empire as their favorite Star Wars movie, and I understand that completely. I think the one thing that puts A New Hope over the edge for me for my favorite, like just puts it barely above Empire, because I love Empire. I love me some Empire, but I think it's just that it's the first. You know, A New Hope is the first one. It's the origin of all these characters. You know, our first meeting of them, and then Empire is a continuation of that story.
Absolutely.
So I think, just the whole origin aspect of it, the first one, I think that's what puts A New Hope, gives it a slight edge over Empire in my book. But Empire, it's in every other way, it is at least right up there, even with A New Hope.
But it's just without a doubt, we had to follow New Hope with Empire.
Yeah.
You can't separate the two.
No.
They may be separate movies, but again, it's just, it's episode 5.
Yeah.
It's all part of the same story.
Episode 5, 4, 5, and 6 were the first 3 movies made of the series.
Separate, when I look at the Lord of the Rings movies, I have a hard time separating any of them.
Yeah.
Or how you separate the books of Lord of the Rings. They all contribute to each other.
Yeah.
And, obviously we're of an age where these movies came out before you were born, and you just kind of think about how you would have viewed them theatrically. Because Star Wars is so groundbreaking. No one had heard of George Lucas.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Outside of maybe some film critics, right?
Yeah.
Because
or his core group of friends who hadn't made a huge movie yet, like Steven Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola.
Because either of those movies were not that well known.
No, they were all budding directors at the time.
Massive smash hit.
Yeah,
globally, not just not just domestically, globally, and just anticipated sequel. And a lot of ways helps. You have Godfather 2, but it kind of kicks off that summer sequel. Those summer sequels.
Yeah.
People were waiting for it, and
I mean, you and I were both born after 1980, right? You and I were both born after 1980, so our first theatrical experience of anything Star Wars were the re-releases in '97,
right?
The special edition releases. So I go back and I think about what these movies what had to have been like, when they first came out in 1977 and in 1980 and in 1983.
I just wonder too, we live in such a different age now. There's all these spoilers and these hits, whether it be a TV series or a movie about what the next one's going to have.
Speaking of spoilers, by the way, spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about the entire movie of Empire Strikes Back. And we'll probably be mentioning things from various other movies or TV shows, and we're going to try not to spoil those as best we can. But just a warning, some slight spoilers might come out for some of those. But we are definitely going to be spoiling every bit of Empire Strikes Back on this episode. So if you have not seen the movie and you don't want to be spoiled, then pause the podcast, watch the movie, come back to it. If you don't care about spoilers, then go ahead, keep listening, and then enjoy the movie. Because it is a fantastic movie, and I highly recommend everybody see it.
If you don't know the spoiler, please just watch Empire first. Anyway, but people went into things more blind than they do today, right?
Yeah.
You don't have as many, the internet to go through all these theories. And New Hope does not really telegraph it that much.
No.
There's a few faces in there But that's about it.
Because at that point, when A New Hope was written, I don't know that part of the story was thought up yet.
Right. I've read reviews of people, this is from the guy that was born like in the early 70s. So, he kind of had that experience of, I guess he had read the Empire novelization before the movie came out.
Okay.
So was kind of spoiled for him, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to kind of separate it because it does continue into that. And I think that's one of the things when I watch it today, I just kind of think like, yeah, I kind of wish I could have had an unspoiled experience.
Yeah,
because it is so well known.
When I first saw it, because like I had mentioned in the our A New Hope discussion, I first saw the movies when I was about 11 years old. I watched the VHSs that my dad just happened to have. And, I watched them back to back pretty much. I think I watched one day. I watched them over like a 3-day period. I watched one a day. But yeah, I didn't have any prior knowledge of the spoiler of the big reveal at the end of
right.
Empire, which, just so we don't have to keep on dancing around it anymore, Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Yeah. He's his daddy.
So
Uncle Owen knew it.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, I'm afraid of that.
Uncle Owen knew it. Obi-Wan knew it. Everybody knew it except Luke.
Everybody knew it except Luke. And Leia.
And Han and Chewie and the main group of people in the movie didn't know it.
But no. Yeah.
But yeah, the big reveal is Darth Vader tells Luke that he is his father.
But again, great thing is my son had no idea.
Yeah. And it's always great seeing somebody who hasn't seen it before and who doesn't know that reveal, seeing the look on their face when it happens, when it comes out, and seeing their reaction to it. And that's so rare nowadays because it's like the biggest movie reveal of all time.
It is. There's a couple others in there, and I won't discuss them. But yeah, he had no clue about it.
Yeah, there's other reveals that come out in other movies that we won't talk about right now.
He's young enough not to get some of that other noise. And it's funny because he's seen Toy Story 2, and Toy Story 2 references it explicitly because it's such a famous scene.
Yeah. And funny thing, when they were filming that scene, the script did not reveal that. The script that everybody had did not reveal that. It said Obi-Wan killed your father instead of I am your father. And the line, it's also one of the most often misquoted lines in movie history. Everybody keeps on saying it's Luke, I am your father. It's actually no, I am your father.
Yeah.
Because the exchange is Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. Then Luke says, he told me enough. He told me you killed him. And then Darth Vader says, no, I am your father.
Which is really an interesting way of looking at it. Because, we talked about the TV series now. And, it's pretty, clear, even in terms of I think in some ways, even Vader's understanding of it.
Yeah.
That Vader is really the one that does away with Anakin.
Yeah. Yeah. So, back in A New Hope, when Obi-Wan said, Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil, betrayed and murdered your father. That's not untrue. No,
it's not. There's layers of that. And again, I haven't really thought about it until we've discussed these last two. This watching Sith, Obi-Wan, New Hope to kind of together with Empire, how well it all kind of fits with that arc of Anakin.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized that watching kind of Obi-Wan at first until rewatching New Hope and Empire. But
yeah,
it's there.
Yeah.
And there's layers of it to kind of sift through.
Yeah, and it's funny because
and I get that's why some people like to elevate Empire because it brings some of those themes, loss and of these relationships in.
And because Empire, it's a non-traditional movie. It has a non-traditional ending.
Yes.
It lives up to its title, The Empire Strikes Back. The Empire wins that movie.
It's dark as hell. Like I said, the Empire wins. Like, you have no idea. There's so many points in there, you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, and back to the Luke scene, the Luke and Darth Vader reveal scene. Very few people actually knew about that reveal before it premiered. It was George Lucas and a handful of other higher ups in there, and they called Mark Hamill in and explained to him what it was before they filmed it. But everybody else thought that it was as the script said. It wasn't until they brought in James Earl Jones to dub over Darth Vader's voice that they actually recorded what the line actually was. When David Prowse was reading the lines in the Darth Vader suit, he was reading it as it was written with Obi-Wan killed your father, and it that can elicit the same reaction that Luke gave.
Yes,
because Obi-Wan was his mentor, and finding out that he killed his father, would give the same reaction as Darth Vader coming out and saying, "I'm your father."
Yeah, it's just strange because you have then now his father killing his mentor.
Yeah,
it's flipped.
Yeah,
it's Even though there's this aspect
and him watching it happen,
Obi-Wan's losing. We didn't talk about last time. There's lots of Gandalf themes within his sacrifice.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
We're talking about Empire. But yeah, it's just you can't get around that scene because it ends up being this pivotal point for everything else happening. You have at that point now you really want to know, okay, how did he fall to the dark side?
Yeah.
At that point before, okay, he's evil, but now you want to know, okay, what happened?
Which is then why Lucas went back and made the prequels.
Yeah.
To follow Anakin's story.
Without that, you don't care. You don't care.
Which I'm going to go on record by saying I enjoyed the prequels. A lot of people, especially a lot of people our age, hated the prequels. I never hated them. I always thought they were great. I thought they were great movies. I really enjoyed them.
Decent enough. I
never held them to the same standard, the same height of love that I have of the original trilogy.
Is that people just want them to be there.
That's because those are the ones that I grew up with,
and they're a little bit lower.
Yeah, the original trilogy is what we grew up with, and the prequels are different, but they're still the same. It's kind of weird how that happens. But I have been enjoying how in recent years the prequels have seen a lot more love. They have, yes. It's interesting. They push things a lot of way. Empire pushed things in new directions. I could see. I'm not as well versed in the total reaction of Empire. I could see some people being like, "Oh, this is vastly different than New Hope." Yeah, it's not as action oriented. No, it's really not. One of the early things that I noticed, back when I first saw it, back when I was 10 or 11 years old, it was that Luke never splits the wings in his X-wing in the entire movie. Nope, not at all. Yeah, there are not many space battles in there. You can, this might be something we can get into this a little bit when we discuss Jedi. And some of it might be with age. There's a certain thing people talk about with when's the first time you watched Jedi? I'll just say right now, my son Charles, his favorite Star Wars movie is Jedi. But given his age, I get it right now. Yeah, back when I first saw it, Jedi was my favorite. But again, I saw it when I was 10 years old. And it's the same reason that I think some people as they get older, lean towards Empire for particular reasons. Because they can finally understand it. Because it's a more adult story. Right. There are things that you don't pick up on until you're older. Yeah. And you don't truly appreciate it of his until dad being this evil dude. Yeah. That's a level that as you get older, you grapple with differently than being 8. For all the Star Wars movies, the main audience was always kids. It was always younger people. Absolutely. It wasn't a movie that was necessarily made particularly for adults, which is why so many people who saw it when they were younger, it's made such a huge impact on their lives, myself included. Yes. But that doesn't mean that there's not adult themes in them, in the movies. Right. No, it's escapist in that it works equally well for kids to watch it and enjoy and have a great time and learn so much from them. But then you watch it again as an adult, and you pick up on so much more that you didn't see as a kid. And you learn to appreciate it even more.
Without a doubt. Yeah, and again, it's like, even like I said, like Walter Charles, just seeing those as he watches it, you pick up on some of the things, and some of the joy of it is finding the things you kind of lost the joy in too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, like we've said, Empire is the most adult of the original trilogy,
hands down. Empire is the most adult of the original trilogy,
and so
it's the darkest.
I wondered how he would perceive it watching it, especially like the twist. Like, okay, it was like, okay, all right, Darth Vader's his dad, but it's different thinking about that as you're 8, as opposed to when you're 14 or 20 or 30.
Yeah, or almost 40, like we
different
are.
Level.
Yeah. It hits differently no matter what age you see it at. I've seen this. I've seen Empire. I lost count of the number of times that I saw it, over the years. I've seen it at least hundreds of times. It's one of those ones that, I try to watch at least the original trilogy, if not all the movies, at least once every year or two, or a couple of times a year. It's probably the original trilogy is probably the 3 movies that I watch more than any other movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it speaks a lot about, George Lucas and his making it, and everybody involved, not just him, but everybody involved, that I can return to these movies so many times and it never gets old.
And the great thing about, he didn't even direct it.
No, he didn't even direct this one.
Directed it.
Yeah, he didn't even direct this one. Yeah, Irvin Kershner directed it.
Obviously, it's his vision, and someone picked it up. It was Kershner, even as an indie director, he was mostly nameless.
Yeah.
He didn't do a whole lot after it either, but he does such a great job with it. And part of that's because there's no ego involved in it. He just films what he's supposed to film.
Exactly.
And he just lets everything else fall into place. And again, we talk about world building. Most of New Hope, you don't really have the Death Star, the Millennium Falcon, and Tatooine as the 3 main.
Then you have a little bit on Yavin 4,
right? But
not much.
Not much. You don't really even get a sense of it. Most of it's just set.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden you have Hoth, and build Hoth. It starts off even people I remember we talked about when you first see it I knew people that are big Star Wars fans, and I had just seen Star Wars and then briefly later saw Empire. This is back in middle school. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right with the ice planet, right?
Yeah. I mean, so much of the movie actually
a lot of people,
takes place on Hoth.
That's what they first think about it if they don't know Star Wars. I was like, oh yeah, it's the ice planet movie.
Yeah, so much of the movie takes place on Hoth. The entire first act of the movie is on Hoth.
Yeah.
People don't necessarily realize how much actually happens on that planet. Luke gets attacked by the Wampa when he's out investigating a meteor strike that ends up being the probe droid, which I read somewhere that, him getting the lightsaber when he's hanging upside down in the Wampa's cave was the first time that anything physically was manipulated by the Force in the movies. But that's not true, because in A New Hope, Obi-Wan creates the distraction with the stormtroopers when he's shutting down the reflector shield. When he's shutting down the Death Star tractor beam.
Which I like the mix of that. They kind of call back to it in the Obi-Wan series.
Yeah.
It's we don't need to get into that, but yeah.
But yeah, when Obi-Wan is distracting the stormtroopers on the Death Star when he's shutting down the tractor beam, that's way before Luke calls his lightsaber to his hand. So people that are saying that Luke calling his lightsaber to his hand is the first appearance of the physical world being manipulated by the Force is that's not accurate.
I've always kind of wondered though, you get that aspect, he's at the end of New Hope, he's still definitely a novice, and kind of think about the building of his skills between then and there. Because obviously, as we get to see later in the movie, there's a lot of training he still needs to do.
And there's actually, in the last couple of years, the more recent comic runs have had Luke's adventures between A New Hope and Empire. So you get to see some of the training that he's gone through in those. But going by the movies, you don't necessarily know how much training he's been through, but he goes through a lot more with Yoda.
Right. It's easy to think that it's all very rapid, and when it really isn't. I mean, like I said, Yoda has a lot to teach him.
Yeah. I mean, Empire takes place a couple of years after A New Hope. So there's been some time there for him to train off screen.
Yeah. You know what's going on. Like, again, they're picking up an entirely different world that you haven't seen. And yeah, they're in completely different positions. Like, even their interactions are different between the characters, whether it be between Luke and Han, Luke and Leia, or Han and Leia, Han and Luke.
Even Luke and Chewie.
Yes.
When Luke is going out to fight the walkers, he's, gets his pilot gear on and everything. He's going out and he starts scratching Chewie's neck before Chewie wraps him up in a big old hug.
Like, even,
I originally thought that he was doing some sort of like salute to Chewie, like putting his hand on his shoulder or something. But then more recently, I noticed that his fingers are moving when he's up there. He's scratching his neck.
Yeah. Like, even look at R2, right? At first, like, okay, R2 has this message with this beautiful girl on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's focused on.
Yeah.
Right?
But yeah,
and
Empire,
you could end of New Hope.
Yeah.
Like, he's like trusting R2.
Yeah.
But even more so,
End of A New Hope, when they're loading R2 into the back of his X-Wing, he asks the guy asks Luke if he wants a different droid. He's like, this one looks pretty beat up. You want a different one? And Luke's like, not on your life. This little droid and I have been through a lot together.
And then by the time Empire comes around, like, it's an even deeper relationship.
Yeah. To the point where, R2 is sitting outside in the freezing cold weather, scanning for Luke.
Yes.
To the point where, C-3PO needs to come and drag him back inside. I mean, not physically drag him back inside, but convince him to come back inside because it's getting too cold.
It's always one of those little aspects of the movie, like, like the relationship between the droids and the humans and how they really sell it. And it feels real.
All the more reason why R2 should have gotten Purple Heart at the end of A New Hope.
They deepen it well enough at the end of New Hope, but then you pick it up and like you just believe enough that they've gone through more, and they have a completely different relationship.
Yeah. I mean, like we were mentioning in the New Hope one, where all the characters, they have history. You can tell by the way it's acted, by the way it's written, everything. You can tell that each of these people have history, and the people they're interacting with know of that history. They don't mess with Han Solo. They don't mess with Darth Vader, And you can tell in Empire that these characters that met in A New Hope, like we've been saying, they have a whole new dynamic to their relationship in Empire, because even though you don't see what goes on between the movies, you can sense that they've been through some stuff together.
Right. I mean,
you can tell, that they've been through things that have brought them closer. Their relationships are different.
It's a major plot point later that feeds into Jedi. And we talked about it's an added scene into New Hope, where Han's talking with Jabba, talks Jabba down. It's like, no, I'll pay you. Don't worry about me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And by the end of New Hope, obviously, Han comes back, helps Luke save the day. And instead of finding a way to go back to pay off Jabba, he stays with the Resistance.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, he very well could have.
Knowing that
in a couple of years there, he could have gone and paid Jabba. But he mentions at the beginning of Empire that he needs to go pay Jabba. Because the bounty hunter they ran into on Ord Mantell,
it's been a couple of years, he said,
changed his mind that he
paid this dude back.
Yeah.
And obviously, it then comes back later in the movie and ends up betraying them in some ways, but it picks up well because you realize that they're still fighting. Like, it's this big victory, right? And you get it, that the Death Star would have been this big blow that they didn't destroy it.
Yeah.
You gotta have the Empire kind of rebuild to a certain extent where they can be all powerful.
Yeah. Then they had to flee their base after A New Hope because the Empire knew where it was.
Well, they knew it was.
The Death Star was on the way to destroy it when, the X-Wings went out and attacked the Death Star.
Which, by the way, we didn't even talk about New Hope. I thought that was an interesting callback from the Obi-Wan series of knowing how to track people.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah.
But the Empire is still there.
But so the rebellion had to flee Yavin 4 after the Death Star battle, and they landed on Hoth. That Hoth might not have been their next base. We don't know. The opening crawl makes it seem like Hoth was their next base, but they haven't really confirmed, as far as I know, that they didn't stop at one or two other places before that. But in the first act of the movie, the Empire comes back and they cause them to run away from Hoth. The movie's not even close to being over at that point. And they're already having to find a new base of operations.
And I just think, it gets into world building. There's the AT-ATs, I was built in. Yeah. And like I said, they keep fighting and they have to, they flee again.
And by the way, the Empire was the first time in any Star Wars movie where a non-Jedi used a lightsaber. When Han cut open the Tauntaun to stuff Luke into.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. He used Luke's lightsaber to cut open the Tauntaun.
The last time we were talking about Lego prices, I'm looking at an AT-AT right now. That's $800.
Wow. When we were growing up, Legos were for kids to play with. They were affordable. Now it seems like they're only catering to adults. Like the people who...
That's what happens.
Not even any adults, but just adults that have jobs where they can afford to...
$800.
$800 for some plastic that they can put together and
relying on there's enough
infinite
adults
years
that
of
make a lot of money,
enjoyment out of,
that are geeks that have disposable income.
Yeah. One of these days I want to know what it's like to have disposable income.
It looks awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
I'd build it.
I would too. Get that and the $2,000 Millennium Falcon, and
sure, there's a Death Star that's
however
out there.
Much the Death Star is.
Lego Death Star. That's it. The Star Destroyer is $700.
Wow. I actually still have, from when I was a kid, I still have a Lego A-Wing from back when, they were first starting, when they just would randomly come out with a Star Wars set or something before, they had regular Star Wars Lego sets. I got an A-Wing back in the day. It's a smaller one. It was only $20 at the time. But yeah, I've got it in a box tucked into a closet somewhere. But yeah.
I really want to know what happened. It was a lot of money when I saw it. There's a toy store in Ellicott City, Maryland, which has been flooded twice. There's the downtown Ellicott City, Maryland. There's this kind of classic toy shop. I saw in the window an original Lego set of the Millennium Falcon. I'm like, oh, that's a
oh yeah.
And that was a lot of money. I don't remember the price of it. And I every time I think about that, I just kind of think I really hope that wasn't. It's been the downtown has been flooded twice because I just hope that was saved.
Yeah. Now, one thing I do still have that I got back in the 90s from the Star Wars toy collection that came out in 95, right?
Yep.
I have the Millennium Falcon from that, the Power of the Force Millennium Falcon, which was $50 at the time, which, as a kid, that was really, 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 really expensive.
Yes.
But I saved up my money and I bought it, and I have had it ever since. And I still have the box for it, too.
All right, yeah.
So, yeah, for some reason I kept the box. I mean, not that I'm really ever going to plan on selling it because I have so many great memories with that thing. But in the off chance that someday I do sell it, I still have the box. So if I'm ever in that much need of money that I need to sell my old toys that I loved so much growing up.
But yeah, we're getting off on toys. That's great because it's a movie that lends itself to that.
Yeah.
A series that lends itself to that. But yeah, it picks up so well because okay, it brings you to these characters that you know, but in a completely different world that you don't know. And it's not right after. So you realize that, okay, they've been doing their best to fend off, and now all of a sudden this is major fight to them. Okay, this is stand. And they hold it all, right? Yeah. But they get scattered.
Yeah, I mean they're going out there, they're in their snow speeders, or they're modified air speeders, modified to be able to operate in the extreme cold of Hoth. Going out there, the blasters on those ships aren't strong enough to pierce the hull of the AT-ATs, or I've always called them AT-ATs. Yes. I've always been one of those people that calls them AT-ATs over AT-ATs. But either pronunciation is accepted by the majority of Star Wars people from what I understand. So anyway, So, yeah, their blasters aren't strong enough to pierce the hulls, which they still had a bunch of X-Wings. Why didn't they just take those out? But that's they wanted to introduce new ships. They wanted to introduce new vehicles. That's
one of the glorious things about Star Wars is that you can pick this stuff apart.
Yeah. But yeah, part of it, comes from a merchandising standpoint. They have to introduce new vehicles so that kids buy new toys.
Money.
Yeah. But yeah, so they come up with the ingenious idea of, using the harpoons and tow cables to trip the AT-ATs.
Right.
And it was sort of a spur of the moment decision to do that too. Because if you're looking at it, Luke is he flies through the legs of one of them and then shoots at the other one and it doesn't pierce the hull.
Yeah.
And that's when he comes with the idea of let's use the harpoons.
Yeah.
Unless there was some briefing beforehand that, they're like, hey, if the guns aren't strong enough to pierce the hull, let's trip them up. But that was never shown in the movie. So you have to, sort of believe that it was a spur of the moment decision on Luke's part to trip him instead of trying to blast him, which Luke didn't even get a chance to do because he was shot down before he could do it.
Yeah, he was.
His snowspeeder was hit and Dak was killed, his gunner. And then he was shot down and he crashed, and Wedge and Jansen were the first ones to actually trip a walker.
Yep.
But Luke did take one down with a grenade. That was great. He gets a little grappling gun and shoots up, sticks to the bottom of the walker and goes up there, cuts it open with his lightsaber and tosses a grenade up in there.
Yep.
Takes the thing down.
But all of that, even the entire interaction between him and Han and Leia, you can tell it's growing deep by the time. Where's Luke?
Just the relationships of the characters are so much stronger than they were at the end of A New Hope. They're all worried about Luke being out there. Han is risking his life to go after him in the snow.
Yes.
He's told that he will not survive the night, and he goes anyway.
And Leia is worried about both of them.
Yeah. Then after, Han comes back with Luke, then the rest of the time on Hoth, Han and Leia are sort of doing their flirt arguing the whole time.
Yeah. Then you get Luke and Leia, and it gets awkward later.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not awkward in New Hope. It gets a little awkward in Empire.
But at the time that it happened in Empire, that part of their story hadn't been thought up yet. So that reveal hadn't been thought up yet. So at least from what I understand. But yeah, so they, narrowly escape Darth Vader, who just got onto Echo Base.
Yeah.
Mostly because the Millennium Falcon has that secret gun that pops down, that awesome secret pop-out gun that took out all the snowtroopers. So they get out of there. Luke gets to his X-Wing. He goes to Dagobah. Han and Leia and Chewie and C-3PO are flying through the asteroid field trying to get away from the Empire. They go into what they think is just a hole in an asteroid, but end up flying down the throat of a space slug.
Which, later, I get it was before Star Wars. It's for me, I think of that as Major Dune.
Yeah. So what I don't understand is they're inside the space slug's gullet. Somewhere down his throat.
Yes.
They're not really close to his mouth because you can't really see the teeth from where they are. So they're far enough down his throat to be somewhere in there. But there are Minox flying around, living inside this thing.
Yeah.
You'd think that it would have swallowed those things by now. But there are a bunch of them. There are a bunch of Minox just hanging out, flying around inside the space slug. And it's not like they're just, like the wrasse, the fish that cleans up sharks, that hangs around sharks and keeps them clean. It's not like that because it's not something that's specific to space slugs because they know what Minox are.
Yes.
They mention that they're Minox and that they're probably chewing on the Falcon's power cables. So it's an established creature, but somehow they're living inside the thing.
Doesn't seem like it's the belly.
No.
Somewhere down the throat, halfway.
Yeah.
He's just chilling.
I mean, it seems like they're standing on its tongue when they're walking around out there, so it can't be that far down.
No. Interesting enough. But again, it's all the world that they built. Yeah. And like I said, Luke's off. He's training. It's always some of my favorite stuff.
Yeah.
Because I love Yoda.
Yeah, Yoda's awesome. The way that they brought Yoda to life was just incredible.
Yeah.
Here they have this puppet that's brilliantly puppeteered and voiced and everything by Frank Oz,
because
the master puppeteer.
I had recently more watched the prequels where he's just CGI, and it's like,
yeah, it loses something.
Yoda is one of my biggest complaints to prequels. Because it's not the same.
It's not.
As the puppet.
It's not, which is where sometimes you need the puppet.
We just watched E.T. And E.T.'s a puppet.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And you see E.T., how he acts as a puppet and interacts with everybody else. And like Yoda acting with Luke as a puppet, it hits differently. And that's the point where, like, yeah, we're, at least I get the understanding of like being upset with the prequels relying too much on the effects.
Yeah. But the prequels relying so much on the effects is what George Lucas wanted from the start. It's just that technology didn't exist.
That's why he had used the puppets.
At the time.
Yes. Right.
So you can't fault the guy for wanting to use the most advanced technology that's available.
Mm-hmm. But, it's easy to, I guess, from his look at, like, he lost perspective that lost realism of what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, Luke goes into the dark side cave on Dagobah, faces off against the Phantom Darth Vader, realizes that that's what he could become if he doesn't complete his training properly and if he makes the wrong choices.
There's a weird, I shouldn't say weird, but like there's definitely a foreshadowing there, though.
Yeah.
Between what happens later in Cloud City.
Yeah.
Where there's this understanding where he knows that there's something far more linked between him and Vader.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when he cuts off Phantom Vader's head, the mask explodes and it's Luke's face under it. Yes.
Like, it's beginning to show that. And it's this understanding, like, you're like fighting to become who you're. Like, it's not to make your father being a villain necessarily for everybody.
It fits with both perspectives of it, as Darth Vader being Luke's father or as Darth Vader just being some evil villain. It fits with both of those where Luke is fighting himself as following the path of his father. Or on the flip side, if he makes the wrong decisions, he's fighting the most evil thing that he knows that then he becomes.
Right.
If
that's the thing.
If he doesn't take the path of the Jedi,
it's easy to become.
So it could be either way that you could look dark side with that. So
wherever you go,
yeah,
and that's the fight he has to take. And yeah, and they play it well. If you think about it, like, he's especially considering that, like especially as you get the prequels, like you have far more Jedi are trying to like steer people. Go the right way, but he's aimless. It's obviously, Obi-Wan is gone. He's been entrusted towards Yoda. But, like I said, like Darth Vader's out there and he's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And he knows Luke's potential weakness, which comes into play obviously in Empire, even more so in Jedi.
Yeah.
But it speaks to this being, as it progressed into that, more adult themes, which some people really grasp onto.
Yeah, and
that's why for some people, Empire is the higher movie.
Yeah, and we get our first glimpse of the Emperor in Empire. The first indication that Darth Vader reports to somebody. Yeah,
the two big new characters, right? Yoda and the Emperor.
Yeah, we only see the Emperor in holograms in Empire. We don't see him in person until Jedi. But it's the first confirmation that we get that Darth Vader reports to somebody, that there's somebody higher than him in the hierarchy of the Empire.
Yep. And, you get a little bit less, I guess. Vader becomes more of something. It's not a pawn, but yeah, he is this powerful.
He becomes an assistant.
Yes.
We realize that there's someone who may or may not be more evil than Darth Vader.
Right. I do think that's like one of the strengths of the prequel trilogy is how well that's developed.
Yeah, I
at least in terms of the Emperor.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Yeah. Because in the prequels, you see him as a senator first, and then you see him rise up through the ranks and
it's good that
see his plan
the continuity of the acting.
Yeah.
But, so you have, obviously, Yoda, who is one of my favorite characters in the series.
Yeah. Hands down, Yoda's one of my favorites
watching
too.
E.T.
He's
and
great.
It is funny. I was thinking about this the other day because I was showing Charles E.T. for the first time, and like as a kid dressing up as Yoda for Halloween. E.T. came out in 1982, right? Mm-hmm. So people watching E.T. in 1982 and seeing Yoda,
yeah,
like this,
seeing the kid trick or treating as Yoda,
like a brand new character, right? And now, like Yoda's so iconic. Anyway. Got the Emperor, but now you have Hoth, and then you have Cloud City, and you got Lando.
Yeah, Lando, played by the amazing Billy D. Williams.
Billy D.
Oh, no one can play Lando like Billy D. I mean, no offense to Donald Glover, but I mean he did a fantastic job as a young Lando. He did probably a better job than anybody else could have done, but Lando is and always will be Billy D. Williams.
But and again, it just goes into that like kind of growing of the world. You have these new aliens, these new planets. Now okay, so you kind of have like that new human, like Han's kind of that human that's not the Jedi that you identify with, and now you got like someone that identifies with him.
Yeah.
And being caught between these things.
Yeah. And even going by just their first interaction in the movie, Han and Lando, again, you can tell they have history.
Yes.
It's not just like how some movies like, oh, I got this old friend that I haven't seen in a while, but here he is.
No, but
you can tell
both
that Han
Billy
and Lando
and Ford play it together so well.
Yeah.
That you definitely buy it.
Yeah, you believe that they have history.
And you don't know what it was. It doesn't matter really what it is.
Yeah.
You know that Han's a smuggler.
Yeah, and that's where it's first established that Lando used to own the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
That Han won it from Lando. They don't say where he won it from in the movie. They don't say it was a game of sabacc, but they say that Lando lost it to Han fair and square.
Yes. And you know enough that Lando just wants to keep the Empire off of him. And
yeah, he's got a city to run. He's trying to establish himself as a good guy. As a responsible person, and he has people that he needs to take care of. He has a city that he's running. He's the administrator of Cloud City, and so he made this deal with the Empire to keep them away.
Yeah,
so they could protect. And
unfortunately, they showed up at his doorstep.
Yeah, they altered the deal, and what I absolutely love about just going into Han's character in Empire is when they walk in, when they first find out that the Empire is there.
Yep.
They walk into that banquet hall and Darth Vader's standing at the end of the table. The first thing Han does,
hesitate to shoot.
He draws his gun and he shoots. He draws his blaster, shoots at Darth Vader. He doesn't try to talk to him because he knows that if he lets Vader flinch, then he's a dead man, so he doesn't give him a chance. He sees the threat. He does his best to take care of the threat. Darth Vader, of course, puts out his hand and absorbs the lasers into his hand using the Force, and then pulls Han's blaster to him so that he can't use it anymore. And then he doesn't go and kill Han for trying to kill him. He invites him in for dinner.
Because he's going to be first in carbonite. But
yeah. Yeah, but then so then they were using, when they get to the point where they're using Cloud City's carbonite freezing chamber, because they're wanting to trap Luke in it, but they want to test it to make sure that he's going to stay alive. They test it on Han after torturing him, not asking him any questions, just torturing him just to torture him, just for the sake of torture.
But it goes back and say it's all for Luke. They know who Luke is, and they have a plan.
Yeah.
The viewer doesn't really know it yet.
Yeah, the viewer doesn't necessarily know it yet. But yeah, so they freeze Han at that whole pimp move of, they're about to lower him into the chamber, and Leia tells him she loves him, and like a pimp, he says, I know.
It's well done enough. Like, even at that point, there's been very few, I don't know, they wore it so well. They acted it so well together.
Yeah. Which that scene also, the I know line was improvised. It was ad-libbed by Harrison Ford. Because the line was, I love you too, that Han Solo was supposed to say.
It's not,
and Harrison Ford's like, that's not what Han would say.
He knew Han well enough not to say that line. And it goes back to, like, New Hope. And there's a lot of antagonism between them. And you get a brief glimpse at the very end, like, oh yeah, I knew you'd come back from her, and there's enough that's happened by it.
Yeah.
Somewhat well, and yeah, by the time that happens, you're invested enough because like Han's awesome. You want to know what happens.
Yeah, and they actually
you're able to identify with Leia, C-3PO, seeing this happen.
Yeah. And the whole reasoning behind Han getting frozen in carbonite is because Harrison Ford was the only of the actors, the main cast, who wasn't signed on for a trilogy. He was just going movie by movie. So they didn't know if he was going to come back for Return of the Jedi or not. And they didn't want to kill him off, because they wanted to have the chance to bring him back.
Yeah, that's a good way to open the door for it.
So they froze him in carbonite. If Harrison Ford ends up not coming back for the third movie, then they'll just keep him
He's still frozen in carbonite.
If he comes back, they can thaw him out.
Just hanging in Jabba's palace.
Yep.
Jabba's palace. We'll get that next episode.
But yeah, and when Luke's in his duel with Vader and he falls into the freezing chamber, he does the force jump to get out of it. There was actually a deleted scene in his training with Yoda where Yoda taught him the force jump. So that was originally there, so you could actually see why he was able to jump like that.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That's all some of my favorite stuff, is just his training sequences with Yoda. He misses most of the actual action, but it's some of the best stuff of the movie because of how great Frank Oz is.
Yeah. I mean, not many people can make a puppet come to life.
Yeah.
Like, you look at Yoda, he's a character in the movie. He's just as much a person as, Mark Hamill or Harrison Ford or Carrie
Usually
Fisher.
most puppets, they're puppets, they're puppets.
Yeah. But Yoda,
right?
he is a character
Yoda
in his own right.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, you can watch it, when you first watch it, I guess, you're like, oh yeah, he's a strange person, right? It's what Luke is thinking.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a great Jedi Master.
Yeah.
Like, you have him. Like, you gotta see him.
Yeah. You seek Yoda.
It's just always my favorite stuff is with this Yoda trying to train him. And it's well acted by both. Even Hamill has to act with that. Like, part of it's just like Frank Oz does it so well.
Yeah. Frank Oz is, he doesn't get the credit that he deserves for everything that he's done in Star Wars and really everything that he's been involved in. The Muppets, all that stuff.
No. He's been so influential. And he said the Muppets. He's been a director for so many movies as well himself.
That too.
And just he's so versatile.
Yeah.
He's almost like faceless.
Yeah.
I hear Frank Oz, I just see Yoda because that's who you brought to life.
Yeah.
And it's like so much of that Jedi wisdom in that way. Like, you had Obi-Wan, but it's communicated so many ways through Yoda, whether it be in Empire or Jedi or prequels, Clone Wars, Yoda. And again, why do you think? You think about it. Even go back to the Star Wars, Disney series of Star Wars, the baby Yoda.
Yes,
he's an instant link to something that's really good and really powerful.
It's not Yoda, but it reminds you of him. He's the same kind of alien as Yoda is, just a baby version.
And again, it's all back to Frank Oz and how he would perform that play. And it's why it's why do you think? And I want, not to get too harsh on the prequel, but when you see some of the stuff that that does in that, it's it's different. It's not what drew people to Empire. Because he doesn't do a whole lot in Empire.
No, he doesn't.
He shows he's powerful.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah, he raises Luke's X-wing out of the swamp.
X-wing, yeah,
and shows him that
how am I going to get this out of the swamp?
Size matters not.
Yoda draws it out of the water. Yeah, right.
He shows him the power of the Force.
But he remembers the brain aspect of it and the heart aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's a very important aspect to remember. And it's kind of, I think, something that we look back at New Hope, where Luke is I want to be like my father. And when Yoda helps in some ways kind of kindle that aspect of him, understanding that there's this good aspect that's there that can be found beyond just his sheer power that he has. Because again, we see it, briefly in Empire. We see it more in the prequels, obviously. But yeah, it does.
As far as actual screen time, Yoda doesn't get much in the original trilogy. He's in a couple of scenes in Empire and Jedi, and that's it.
Yeah, like Jedi, it's very brief.
Yeah. Jedi is just a stopover.
Luke flies back and he dies.
Yeah. When Luke goes back to Dagobah to finish his training, he gets there, he's like, oh, your training's complete already, except you need to face Vader.
But yeah, I mean, once you get outside the opening act, most of Luke's time, and he lobs on Dagobah and then faces Vader, which is important.
Yeah, it really is.
Especially given the scope.
Even in that duel between Luke and Vader, you can tell that Luke is trying his best and he's got some skill, but you can also tell that Vader is just toying with him.
Yes.
You can tell that Vader has so much more skill than he's showing.
Yeah.
He's sort of like a cat and mouse kind of thing. But I do want to get into, so after Lando is betrayed by the Empire again, and he calls the evacuation of Cloud City, you got everybody running around. You had that brief shot of Willrow Hood.
With the ice cream machine.
The ice cream maker, yes. The guy running with the ice cream maker. Willrow Hood. So, they've since gone and explained that ice cream maker was not an ice cream maker, but it's called a Camtano, which is a little personal safe where people keep their valuables.
People could also save an ice cream machine.
Yes, people could also save an ice cream machine because ice cream makers are very valuable because they produce delicious treats, delicious frozen treats. But there's actually, I don't remember what convention it is, but there's one of the cons that's out there somewhere where every year they do the running of Willrow Hood, where a bunch of people dress up like him and they actually get that model of ice cream maker, which is an extremely rare model. It's really hard to find.
I'm sure it is
people
at this point.
Dress up like that guy and they carry their ice cream maker and they just run through the convention hall. Sort of like a running of the bulls kind of thing, but it's the running of Willrow Hood.
I'm going to wager those ice cream makers still make ice cream.
Oh, yeah.
Because sure they do. In 1980, they made stuff to last.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As opposed to today, where they make things last for the warranty.
Yeah.
So if it's a 10-year warranty,
then
they make
10 years in a day, it's broken.
9 years.
Yeah. No, they last just long enough to have the warranty not be valid anymore. So 10 years in a day, the thing's broken. But yeah, I guarantee those ice cream makers still work. But we haven't even mentioned Empire's the first appearance of Boba Fett.
Yes. I was going to say.
Well, he had a brief appearance in the special edition of A New Hope as one of the bounty hunters outside the Millennium Falcon when Han was talking to Jabba. But his first actual appearance was Empire. Oh. And that's where everybody saw how big of a badass he is. And it just is not even... He had maybe 3 lines in the movie.
It gets back.
It's just him standing there imposingly everywhere. His just imposing being.
Yeah, it gets back to kind of saying how well they're able to introduce and show characters.
Yeah.
Just right away whether just
and I mean you know that he's a force to be reckoned with, because when Vader brings all those bounty hunters onto the Star Destroyer to have them go after the Millennium Falcon, he specifically tells Boba Fett no disintegrations.
Which people have that effect. And it's played well, and it lasts well, and it's the perfect vehicle towards linking him with Jabba, obviously.
Yeah.
So, and it leaves you hanging.
Yeah.
And it's not even the end of the movie. They got 30, 40 minutes left in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, Luke gets his hand cut off.
And one of the heroes is frozen.
Yeah, Han's frozen in carbonite. Luke gets his hand cut off and then finds out that Darth Vader's his father. A lot of stuff happens there. And then he ends up hanging off of a weather vane at the bottom of the city. One-handed.
The first one doesn't leave you really a lot of it doesn't kill Vader, obviously. It doesn't really give you a lot of those cliffhangers, but no, Empire brings us in.
Yeah.
and you need to know where it goes next. And like, I guess at that point they knew they could really do that because, like, yeah, now you can definitely do the sequel to the sequel.
I mean, then after Lando and Leia go and pick up Luke from dangling on the bottom of Cloud City, they take him back to the Rebel fleet, and the last shot is on a medical frigate, where Luke gets a new mechanical hand, and they're going out looking into space while Lando and Chewie take off in the Falcon to try to find where Boba Fett took Han.
Yep.
And then it just leaves us there. It just says Luke and Leia standing there looking out into space, and then credits roll.
But, I think, that's another aspect people just enjoy. It's like, okay, it's a slightly happy ending, but it's not fully happy.
There's a little bit of a happy ending there, but overall, it's a bleak ending.
Luke doesn't die.
No, Luke doesn't die, but the Empire clearly won.
Yes.
Han got frozen carbonite and taken somewhere. We don't know where yet.
Empire's still doing its thing.
The Rebel fleet still hasn't found a new base. They're kind of just out in space somewhere.
It just leaves you there. And, and I think that's a brilliant way. Like, I get, like, there's just New Hope. You can say, okay, yeah, what happened to Vader? But, okay, it's kind of like they won, they defeated the bad guy. There's that triumphant kind of ending. There's no triumphant part of Empire, right? It's like, okay, Vader didn't kill us, thankfully.
Yeah. I mean, even like the one part that could be construed as a triumphant part would be, Luke's training on Dagobah, which he left early. Yeah. Yoda and the Force Ghost of Obi-Wan were begging him to stay.
Yeah.
And he left, making it a non-triumphant moment.
He doesn't know yet what they know.
Yeah.
Like, you understand, like, yeah, they're afraid of him being manipulated because they know of his attachment to his dad.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know who his dad is. He doesn't know he's about to fight his dad.
Yeah.
They know it, and they have good reasoning for
not telling him.
Hiding that information.
Yeah. Which is then further explained in Jedi. But, yeah.
That Charles hasn't seen that one twice yet. So I'd be interested to see him watch that one again. See what he picks up on or what he doesn't pick on. But it's still the most adult, any of them.
Yeah.
I mean, like Revenge of the Sith gets dark too.
Yes, it does.
In a different way.
It does, yeah, but in a different way. But yeah, also, I mean, I think Empire, hits harder just because it hadn't been done before.
No, it hadn't.
By the time Revenge of the Sith comes around, Episode 3, the darkness is there. You kind of know what's coming because you know the rest of the story. But at the point where Empire Strikes Back comes out, it was only the second movie in the series that had been made. You don't think going into it that it's going to be such a bleak, dark movie.
No.
Which is part of what makes it so great, because it's done so well. Yes. It could have been one of those movies that's just dark for the sake of being dark and just ends up being a crap movie because you can't enjoy it.
Kind of subversive without intentionally being subversive.
Yeah. But yeah, it's done so well that
it gets back to like you were saying, okay, here's this sequel to this movie I really like, this fun summer movie, right? And then like it turns it on its head a bit, and like, oh, this is very different than I was expecting. And like there are people even like 40 years ago, like, I didn't think the sequel of Star Wars was going to be this. It was.
Yeah.
And it's become classic.
Yeah.
And it's they give credit to everybody involved, whether it be Lucas or Kirshner, actors, all the people behind the scenes. Yeah, it's just
even Kasdan with the writing.
Yeah, no, Kasdan. Yeah,
Lawrence Kasdan. We haven't even mentioned him.
The writing of we haven't even mentioned that, but the writing of it, the scripting of it, there was the dialogue and the story came to a totally different level. Like, I mean, Lucas is great. He has great ideas, but in terms of writing and plotting, it's very different than what Kaz was going to bring on.
Yeah.
It was appropriate for the second part. Like, you may not have thought that 40 years ago, but looking back at it now as a larger saga.
Yeah. And I mean,
you needed someone to step it up.
And they knew that they were going to make a third movie, so they had to have a middle movie.
Yeah.
So it leads into Return of the Jedi perfectly. It leaves you at this low point to where then the third movie can raise it back up.
You had talked a lot about Carrie Fisher. It was more in the background. She's not this person to be saved now. She's along for the ride. She's her own person. And she plays out well. You can see her deepen a relationship with both Luke and Han, and how she's still willing, her calls are still the same thing.
Yeah, and then also just
really well.
Something with the character development of Han between the movies. Between A New Hope and Empire.
Okay. You see it right away.
The entire first portion of the movie. Everything on Hoth. Han, I don't think he ever actually calls Leia by her name. He always calls her some version of Your Highness, Your Worship, Your, whatever. He may mention the name Leia once or twice in there, but I don't think he does. And it's not until, when they're hiding from the Empire inside the space slug, thinking that it's just a cave. And, they're in that one little room of the Falcon, and he calls her Your Worship or Your Highness or something. And, then he calls her Your Highness, and she tells him, don't call me that. He never calls her anything but Leia again.
Yep.
Old Han would have kept on going with it, but he's gotten to the point where he respects her so much that she's asked him not to call her that, not to actually call her her name.
That he's thinking about A New Hope.
Yeah, from then on, he calls her Leia.
Yeah, you feel that connectiveness, and they play it well. I think sometimes that chemistry is lost a little bit about the movies, especially like I found City. In the situation, not expecting what's going to happen. Obviously, didn't defrozen in carbonite. So we've talked about that already. Yeah, the two of them play it well together. You see it in the later movies as well. But you never question the growth of it. Like, the end of A New Hope, we kind of had this antagonistic kind of back and forth. Then after they destroy the Death Star, she's like, oh yeah, I knew you would come back.
Yeah.
I think that's the most positive thing she says to him that in New Hope.
And I mean, you could argue that, the uplifting thing of Empire is that's where the whole love story between Han and Leia
really grows.
But then they pull the rug under your feet at the end where they have Han frozen in carbonite.
Like, you kind of start seeing it as this triangle of Han, and they all leave, and Luke goes by himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it becomes this thing like, maybe it's going to be Han. And, oh, no, Han gets frozen in carbonite, and Luke loses a hand.
Yep.
It's really, when you think about it, like, kind of brilliant.
Everybody loses something. Luke loses a hand, Leia loses Han, Lando loses his city, Han loses warmth.
But you gotta watch Jedi to figure out what happens.
Yep. So speaking of, join us next time for we're going to finish off the original Star Wars trilogy with Return of the Jedi. So any last remarks about Empire before we cut it out for until next time?
I would just say, for me, and we might get into them, I won't mention certain ones, but in terms of sequels, there's probably two others. I put up with it. Probably not surprising, but between Godfather Part 2 and Aliens,
both
they're right in there. I always waffle back and forth between Empire and New Hope as my favorite of the movies, because by the time I really started watching them, I was probably in college. And so a lot of the more adult themes we're talking about hit a little bit harder when I was really starting to watch them again. So it's a tough balance.
Yeah.
And that will be something that I think we'll talk about with Jedi in kind of a reverse thing in terms of how kids respond to Jedi.
Yeah.
Which is important. And I think that's what I love about these movies, because you can watch them at any age and you find things that you absolutely love about them and absolutely connect with them. And people can have different opinions. That's fine, because they speak to so many different things.
Yeah.
And that, that's why, like, I don't have a problem when someone says Jedi is my favorite, or New Hope's my favorite, Empire is my favorite, or even Sith's my favorite.
Yeah. I mean, it all has to do with, which ones you were introduced to first, which one, where you were in your life when you saw them, what your personal preferences are for, what you like about movies. I don't condemn people who think the prequels or even the sequel trilogy are their favorites. I enjoy all of the Star Wars movies. I'm one of those people. I could find things in all of them that I really, really enjoy. My favorite trilogy of the three is the original, but that's not saying that the prequels or the sequels are bad. That's not saying that I think they're bad movies. I enjoy every one of them.
It's still a template, though.
Yes,
and it shows everything forward.
Yeah.
So I get when people have strong emotions about the other trilogies.
Yeah.
I have strong feelings about the sequel trilogy. But, for younger audiences without that bias, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, as far as Empire goes as a movie, it's right up there. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's like I said, the only thing that takes A New Hope above it is really just that A New Hope was the first one, that it introduced everything. It introduced this galaxy, this Star Wars universe.
I do think it shows. It's very easy to see a lot of sequels be like mediocre, terrible. Sequels do not have to be that way.
No, they don't.
That
they can be just as good, if not better, than the first one. Yeah, so Empire it's right up there. It's just below A New Hope in my favorite movies. And as far as sequels go, it's one of the best.
Right.
One of the best sequels ever made.
Sequels don't need to be lame. They don't need to be copies that are inferior to the first. They can build on it and be their own thing and build upon it.
Yeah.
It definitely shows that. And, when we explore Jedi does the same thing.
Yeah.
Builds upon it, becomes its own thing, too.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, they're all movies that go that on top of them being, a series, they are also great standalone movies.
Right. No, you can easily watch them standalone.
You don't have to watch the
flipping the
entire
channels
series
on a Saturday afternoon, and one of them is on, no matter what it is, no matter what you watched last, you can just stay on that channel and be okay with it.
Yes, I think that wraps up our Empire Strikes Back discussion.
I think so.
At least for now, unless we come back and revisit it later. That's been Empire Strikes Back. Join us next time for Return of the Jedi to complete the original trilogy on